Peace, y'all. So for recording purposes, this is day 5 of the strat. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to record. I just noticed that I didn't record it as I was doing the breakdown. So we'll go over another breakdown of this class. However, I'm going to play the recording so you guys can be able to have this on file. Peace and love.
Live, and this is the Quant Edge 4-week coaching program, week 2, video 2 on time frame continuity. All right, so we can get to this, and we got through a bunch of stuff. And remember here, the disclaimer as you read that along. We're getting to you got the actionable signals, the beginning of time frame continuity, how who's in control, the 4Cs, how that moves, and tying it all together with actionable signals. So when I left off, we were down to getting to some examples. Let's look at some examples of what we were talking about in video 1. Okay, here. Here you can see FSLR was at one time an actionable signal on the monthly by breaking the high of the inside bar, represented by the shadow or wick. Here, we talked about that, right? At one time, this was green, right? However, it retraced back into the inside of the month, thus changing the condition as the signal is no longer in force. Right? Remember, once it's above this month, the inside month, up into here, that's in force. Once it comes back, it's not. All right, then it's a nothing. All right, it's retesting in here. Right. Once it's back above there, that goes back in force. Right now, it is not. So if we look at the shorter term time frames, we can see the sequence of control based on time frame continuity and actionable signals. So the month was up, and when this is the weekly, and that's when the month went up. All right, and you can see this down, down, daily down, red, actionable signal, inside week, inside day, rough strat week, all that stuff, and we'll get to that. But basically, what we're looking at here, as far as time frame continuity, the weekly time frame started going red when the daily started going red, and that's going to conflict with that, right, and negate that monthly signal. So it wasn't just the time frame continuity itself; it was the actual signal of the inside week and down, the inside day and down, the rev strat day, all right, and then when all this was occurring, if we keep going down in time frames, you can see up in here, 1 bar rev strat 60. That triggered the rev strat day in the inside week and down right there, right? Okay, all that stuff matters. So that's all that negating that monthly chart. It's important to note that the previous chart's last 60-minute break to the downside also changed continuity from green to red on the month, resulting in full time frame continuity to the downside. When everything flipped down, that's what did it, right? Here's how we describe what has occurred in the present condition in FSLR. Presently, FSLR went actionable on an inside monthly bar break to the upside above 35.52 here, combined with an inside momentum hammer signal with full time frame continuity to the upside here. At this point, when it went momentum hammer inside, it was inside month and up, inside day and up, momentum hammer up. All right, with full time frame continuity. At that point, everything was going higher. However, the signal has yet been powerful enough to break the high of the mother bar, and we talked about that, the multiple here. It did do it, just wasn't strong enough to take that. So it's still forming a multi-bar setup. So even when it's doing that, we're going to be aware of anything like the flip and coming back down, right? FSLR then went into conflict by turning red on the daily and the weekly time frames, right? By trading lower than 35.69, right? Taking out the day and taking out the week, taking out the day first, right? Since it was on a Monday when the daily and weekly continuity levels are the same, it formed an additional actionable signal in the inside bar on the daily. Here, bam, weekly, daily, down, weekly, down. we look at it this way here, once again, the inside day triggered to the downside here in the middle. When the 60-minute daily and weekly bars are red, all of them went red. Strat, not only Strat, 60, inside day down, triggering inside week down, right? But when the 60 and the daily and the weekly are red, they're in control and actionable and in conflict with the monthly. All right? That's how we would say that. The inside day daily break was not strong enough to break the previous week's lows. So when it broke down in here, it was still inside week actually. All right, went down. And then formed an inside bar in the weekly. I'm sorry, so this daily went down, but this weekly stayed inside. It was red at that point. All right. But it still formed an inside week as the week ended. Since FSLR closed at 34.75, lower than the inside monthly bar break, it is no longer actionable in force there. It opened the month at 32.61. The monthly direction still was remaining up. The 60-minute daily and weekly continuity levels all begin on Monday. Those remain unknown going forward, right, after that inside week. A break back above 35.52 would place the monthly signal back in force as it would go back above the inside month, and break above the inside weekly at 36.08. That would have given us a weekly-monthly combination, right, confirming as the weekly goes in force, right, all that stuff, because the monthly would be back in force. That would give us a signal to the upside in the weekly. However, should the weekly break to the downside below 34.10, the weekly would be in force so long as the 60-minute and the daily bars are red, right, because they're countering that. If we look at the daily, we now the 2-bar rev strat triggered below 34.51 right here, which was a combination with the weekly. All right, so rev strat here, this changed continuity the inside down, didn't take out the week, so it goes inside week, but then it set up rev strat here. So then you had the conflicting against the monthly that were in control. Rev strat down, weekly down. Per our conversations in the last week, in the last videos, although we tend to avoid trading multiple bar setups as FSLR is on the monthly, we can do it so long as we have actionable signals and adhere strictly to the direction of the groups that are in control. And that's what you can see here. If you don't do that, FSLR are going to chew you up, right? Much like a rev strat changes the direction of an equilibrium, we are also aware that when time frame continuity changes, the participants on the wrong side all experience a loss at that point, right? That's what we want to know about that. If it's going higher on the week and then reverses and goes the other way, that's something you want to know about, right? Just like an actionable signal getting rev strat, the time frame continuity going the other way is something that's important to us as well. Let's look at Mattel. Here we can see how Mattel was green on the daily and the weekly. Be here, start off the week, right? And you can see because of the shadow, it was up in here. It was green above that, going up. Then you close, then gap down, bam. It changes the weekly continuity to the downside. That's something you want to know about. So when we're watching gaps and all that kind of stuff, we want to know if this is changing continuity. That's important. That means all these guys are jammed. Right? Anybody came here and bought it earlier in the week? Underwater, right? So watching for that change in continuity. Also, per our conversation last week, although we tend to, I'm sorry, we got to the, we're still on Mattel. Back in the slide. All right, we'll do it. If we look at the other time frames, we see that Mattel formed a momentum shooting star here on the 60-minute after it gapped, which was below the monthly opening, thus changing continuity on the month as well as the week, and confirming the direction with an actionable signal. So when it gaps down in here, all right, it goes momentum shooting star and goes into full time frame continuity to the downside, and the weekly and the monthly got flipped red. That's a problem, and for the long side, that's good for us, but a problem for the long side. In strong trends, signals and continuity levels will continue to confirm several times. This information also helps us to determine which signals not to take. Right? When we go strong, you just go and go and go and go and go. But understanding these continuity levels and what's changing and what's going on also helps us to tell us things we don't want. All right? Let's take a look at RH. So here, RH daily, weekly. Inside momentum shooting star down here on the daily, and weekly shooting star down here. Weekly and daily actionable signals are confirming. Continuity levels are confirming. It's also red on the month. And then over here, all right, you can see this was a potential rev strat to the upside. All right, you got an inside bar countered by the hammer. All right, that's something we probably don't want to take. It's going down on all time frames, right? That's a problem. So maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It'll be affected by the third universal truth when we get to it. But in general, there's not much we can do with that, right? We would, because it's so powerful to the downside. We would prefer, even if that worked, to look for something like this here, where it goes back inside and then flips back into full time frame continuity, because that would be a more powerful signal. It has a much better chance of working, of flipping back into full time frame continuity to the downside than it does trying to go all the way back up off a 15 rev strat to change to 60 to try and change the daily and weekly signals that are already in force with the three major time frames to the downside, right? So stuff like that we don't want to take. We want to look for these things that confirm and reconfirm actionable signals we already know. They're working for us. All right, so although the rev strat in the 15 may turn the 60 green, we want to avoid the 60-minute one was in conflict with the other major three time frames. All right, we are more likely to get a higher probability set if we wait for it to change back to full time frame to the downside. All right, what I just said, now you can read it again, right? Because you have a much better opportunity of that going full throttle downside than you have coming and taking it all out, right? With those three major time frames in force with actionable signals. Let's look at how one signal can change another. Here you can see Mylan triggered a 1-bar rev strat to the upside here. All right. Inside bar, took out the lows, rallies back up. This occurred on a Friday, so when things matter, this occurred on a Friday, and the weekly signal was presently inside weekly to the downside. All right. However, since the weekly signal was close to exhausting because it's Friday, the 60-minute signal then creates an actionable signal to the upside. All right. Not only is it original position at a profit, but also gives us potential to add to our position the following week. All right. So what is it going to create? Now, in the previous things, we had two going to the downside with 3 time frames to the downside. This was close enough where that if that 60 worked, because it's a Friday, it's going to set up a rev strat going forward. All right? That's what we want. What is it going to create? That 60 is going to create a rev strat if it does it. All right? Identifying natural buyers and sellers. Identifying stocks that have complete conflict in time frame continuity with the respective broader averages or sector ETFs, we can identify where natural buyers and sellers, like institutions, have to be. They have to be there, right? For example, when the Dow Jones crossed above 20,000 this week, spent most of the week with full time frame continuity upside as we went to the upside, all right? So anything that's direct conflict with that's in the Dow Jones, we know there's sellers in there. There has to be. If it has full time frame continuity to the downside, it's got to be sellers. It's in the Dow, and the Dow's going up on all time frames. So if we take a look at Dow component Walmart, had full time frame continuity to the downside, right? It was also rev strat month to the downside. It's red on the week. 4 of the 5 days it was red on the day, right? So here, once again, when it tries to rev strat here, here's your inside 60 and rev strat up here. We have no reason to believe that's really going to work. Right? It's already having all sorts of trouble, right? We prefer, right, for it to rev strat down and take this, because then it kicks back into rev strat month, rev strat 60, full time frame continuity to the downside, and completely conflicting the Dow Jones. That's how we can identify that. There's sellers in there. There has to be, right? So we always want to put all these parts together. And I'll get to that about Dow 20,000 in a little bit here. For this reason, we look for stocks that are both confirmed by the SPY control groups with actionable signals in force, and those that have full time frame against the groups that are controlled. So what do we mean by that? What that means by that is that when whichever direction the SPY and the broader averages are confirmed, right, who is in control, we can look for, let's say if the SPY is full time frame counter to the upside, we can look for stocks that are also full time frame to the upside and downside, all right? And whoever is in control of the SPY, right? Even if it's just the daily and the 60 to the upside, we can find stocks that have full time frame counter to the upside, right? Because they have more and actionable signals. They have more than the SPY does, right? And conversely, anytime that anything that's against control, you want to watch the flip, because that flip can help those things that are already countering really get smashed or really go to the moon. Right? If you're already going up when the 60 is going down, that 60 starts going back up and has some help. That's how we break it down into the stocks themselves, because we know how many have actionable signals where, how many have multiple actionable signals. And so oftentimes when we're looking at the S&P, people are assuming that means take that signal in the S&P. That's not what it means. What it means is that we want to identify who's in control and break it down into the sectors and stocks of who has a lot more evidence. Right? Who has more actionable signals, who has full time frame continuity, the upside or the downside, even when SPY is in conflict. But we want to see that versus who's in control as well. All right. Finally, we can use time frame continuities to find strong stocks that have a lack of actionable signals on the higher time frames. Right? So we've seen things that have inside month to the upside. We know these actionable signals are going to be on our buy list or sell list, based on these longer term time frames. Sometimes they don't have them, right? So we can use time frame continuity to also, look for potential setups as well, right? We can look for the long green and red bars midway through any time frame, right? That tells us something's on the move. Second week of the month, if something's bright green, bright red, right? Wednesday for the weekly, if something's on the move by Wednesday, you're going to see these big red green bars. Midday on the daily, that's, we can see if these things are moving. So if you just look at something like in the bio, UTHR, right? And on the monthly, this thing's been moving up. Now, that's been countering oftentimes the IBB, but for this, all you have to do is look at a monthly chart. Is this thing moving up? Yes, it is, right? Yes, it is. There's no actionable signal there, but it's apparent that it's moving higher, right? When you get it to expand a larger range than normal, and it's bright green, then what that tells us is we can use shorter term time frames and look for full time frame continuity when it has it, and you can use intraday time frame continuity to enter a trade because you have full time frame continuity on everything else. On the longer term, you just don't have any actionable signals. Actionable signals will appear on those shorter term time frames. So in this case, UTHR goes inside day, soft rev strat, pokes down, opens and closes back in here, gives you the rev strat, and all we're looking for that to do is reconfirm full time frame continuity to the upside. It's only one signal, but that's all we need. We already know that this thing's on the move, right? So we can take trades like that, right? This is January 24th, right? Late in the month, but we know at that point this thing's moving higher, right? It's later in the month, and this thing is bright green and going. That means it's being accumulated, and then we can look for that. Okay. So once again, if we go here, we've gone through the time frame participation groups, universal truth of the opening price, the 4 C's of continuity, the importance of uncoupling, event continuity, combining these actionable signals with time frame continuity, and identifying natural buyers and sellers. Now we're going to go to live charts because these are, a few examples, but it helps when we can go into and see certain events, live stuff, what we did, and why we did it, right? So we'll do that in video number 3, and this will conclude video number 2 of the second week. Price that we want to know about for the rest.